The morning briefing was unusually tense. Ava's holographic projection stood at the center of the circular table, her form crisp and steady, though the weight of her words seemed to hang heavily in the air. Ava began, her voice calm and measured. After a thorough analysis of the data provided by Max Williams, I have classified Earth. On the Interstellar Council's planetary rating scale, which typically maxes out at 10, Earth registers as a Class 23 deathworld. The room fell silent. Kabo's broad shoulders stiffened, his ursine features darkening as he let out a low growl under his breath. Malinar's fur bristled slightly, though her expression remained composed. Her empathy receptors picked up on the wave of unease rippling through the room. Ava continued, unperturbed by the tension. Earth's classification is based on its geography, extreme biomes, volatile weather patterns, and biodiversity, including pathogenic dangers and the predatory nature of its fauna. However, her voice shifted slightly, almost as if she sought to ease the room. I must stress that Max's species, despite originating from such an environment, has an extensive history of cooperation, problem-solving, and peaceful intentions. Humanity has demonstrated remarkable adaptability and resilience, traits that, when directed constructively, can yield incredible potential for collaboration. Kabo huffed, his claws lightly scraping the table's surface. Potential, perhaps, but potential for what, Ava? Cooperation or destruction? Ava tilted her head, her holographic form flickering slightly. That remains to be determined, Captain. However, I must note that Max's actions thus far align with the former rather than the latter. Later that morning, Malinar approached the isolation habitat. She hesitated for a moment outside the door, her implant updated overnight with Ava's latest linguistic decryption. She was curious to see if the changes would allow for smoother communication with Max. Taking a calming breath, she entered. Max was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor with his tablet in hand. His cryopod loomed behind him, a silent reminder of his journey. He glanced up as she entered, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly in caution before his expression softened. "Good morning," Malinar said, testing the new translation. Max blinked, his brows lifting in surprise. The words weren't in English, but he understood them. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Good morning," he replied, his voice quiet and hesitant but unmistakably genuine. Malinar returned the smile, taking a cautious step closer. "Ava tells me she can convert our language into yours now. It's not perfect, 54% accuracy, but it should improve the more we talk." Max nodded, lifting his tablet to show the translated text that had appeared on its screen. "I'll help where I can," he said. "If I stop mid-sentence to ask about tone or syntax, don't mind me." Malinar chuckled softly, pulling up a chair nearby. "I don't mind. It's refreshing to see someone so dedicated to understanding." The conversation started simply, with Malinar asking about Max's background. He spoke of his early life on Earth, a world he described as vast and fascinating but, frankly, boring for someone like me. He explained his academic achievements, his rapid ascent through schooling, and his parents' suggestion to join the colony program, a suggestion that had ignited a passion he hadn't known he possessed. "They wanted to see the stars," Max said, his voice tinged with both fondness and melancholy. "And so did I. Earth was never enough for me. I thought the colony program would be the start of something incredible." Malinar listened intently, noting how his tone softened when speaking of his family. She felt his loneliness, like a shadow stretching behind his words, but it was lighter now, as though speaking with her had chipped away at its edges. The conversation took a sudden turn when Malinar mentioned Earth's classification. "Ava says your planet is a Class 23 deathworld," she said carefully, watching his reaction. Max froze, his eyes widening slightly. "Class 23?" he repeated, his tone incredulous. "That's high, isn't it?" Malinar nodded. "It's far above the standard scale. Most species in the Interstellar Council come from garden worlds, classifications ranging from 2 to 5. Max's gaze dropped to his tablet, his expression growing more troubled. "So, Earth being a death world makes me—" "What?" Dangerous? Malinar hesitated, choosing her words with care. Some might see it that way. Deathworlders are rare in the galaxy, and their reputations often precede them. This is why Captain Kabo is wary of you. Max's lips twitched into a faint, humorless smile. Wary, huh? I think he sees me as a walking disaster waiting to happen. Malinar tilted her head. He's cautious. His species, the Outhaddens, have a long history of conflict with Deathworlders. For him, it's personal. Max nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. I get it. He's like a mama bear. Malinar blinked, confused. Mama bear. Max's smile grew a bit more genuine as he explained. On Earth, bears are large, strong predators. A mama bear is fiercely protective of her cubs and suspicious of anything that could be a threat. It's not a bad thing. It means he cares about his crew. But it can make him prickly. Malinar couldn't help but laugh. A soft, melodic sound that made Max glance up in surprise. I suppose that's an apt comparison, she said, her voice warm. But I'd advise against calling him that to his face. Max chuckled, the sound light and genuine. Noted. As the conversation continued, Malinar noticed a subtle but profound shift in Max's demeanor. The guarded, calculating edge he often carried seemed to soften, replaced by a warmth she hadn't expected. It was uncharacteristic of Deathworlders, who were often described as harsh and unyielding by nature. But Max wasn't harsh. He wasn't unyielding. He was human. And for the first time, Malinar felt she was beginning to understand what that truly meant. The days following Max's first meaningful conversation with Malinar were a whirlwind of progress and subtle tension aboard the ISC Horizon. Each day, Max poured his efforts into refining the lexicon, his focus unwavering as he worked to build a linguistic bridge between himself and the crew. Ava's constant support ensured the lexicon's accuracy climbed steadily. By the end of the third day, she reported a staggering 91.7% accuracy in both directions, a feat she attributed to Max's persistence and methodical approach. But Max's work wasn't limited to the lexicon. He made a point to interact with anyone who entered the isolation habitat, whether it was Malinar, Ava, or even the technicians delivering supplies. Each conversation was cautious but deliberate, as Max offered small smiles and simple greetings, slowly chipping away at the wariness that clung to the crew like a fog. Even Kabo wasn't spared. Max greeted the captain with a steady voice whenever he visited, despite Kabo's curt responses and gruff demeanor. Though their exchanges rarely extended beyond a few words, Max never stopped trying. The debate over granting Max a translator implant began during one of the morning briefings. Ava, Kabo rumbled, his deep voice carrying an edge of frustration. You're suggesting we place a neural device inside a Deathworlder's brain? One we barely know. Ava's hologram stood tall and unwavering. Captain, my analysis of Max's behavior and the data he has provided suggests no hostile intent. His efforts to communicate have been consistent and transparent. A translator implant would expedite the process and allow for clearer, real-time communication. Malinar leaned forward, her ears twitching slightly. Kabo, I've spent more time with Max than anyone else on this ship. I've spoken with him, felt his emotions. He's cautious, yes, but he's not a threat. His fear is of being misunderstood, not of us. Kabo crossed his arms, his claws tapping against his biceps as he glared at the hologram. And what if we're wrong? What if this is some elaborate ploy? Malinar's voice softened. Then why would he work so hard to build trust? Why spend days refining a lexicon and opening himself up to us? He's been nothing but cooperative. Kabo's eyes narrowed, his claws flexing slightly as he leaned forward. Because he's smart. He knows how to manipulate. Deathworlders are cunning, Malinar. They don't survive on their planets by being naive. Ava interjected, her tone firm but calm. Captain, there is no evidence to support that claim. Furthermore, granting Max the implant would eliminate misunderstandings and strengthen trust. If we continue to rely solely on the lexicon, we risk stagnating our progress. The debate stretched on, Kabo's mistrust clashing with Malinar's empathy and Ava's logic. Eventually, Kabo let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Fine," he said, his voice gruff. "But if anything goes wrong, the responsibility is on both of you." When Malinar approached Max to explain the plan, she found him hunched over his tablet, engrossed in tweaking the lexicon's algorithms. At her explanation of the translator implant, his reaction was immediate, a furrowed brow and a stream of rapid-fire questions. "What does it do beyond translation? How does it interact with my brain? Is it invasive? Can it be removed if necessary? What's the failure rate?" Malinar blinked, taken aback by the intensity of his questioning. But as she listened, she realized there was no anger in his voice, only a guarded fear of the unknown. He wasn't being hostile. He was simply trying to understand. With Ava's holographic assistance, Malinar carefully explained the implant's functionality, the procedure, and the safeguards in place. She outlined each step, emphasizing the non-invasive nature of the surgery and the implant's limited scope. Max listened intently, his sharp mind absorbing every detail. When she finished, he was silent for a moment before nodding slowly. "All right," he said quietly. "I trust you. Let's do it." The procedure itself was straightforward, but not without complications. Once the implant was in place, Max's body reacted almost immediately, his aggressive immune system interpreting the device as a foreign threat. Ava and Malinar worked quickly to administer a countermeasure, stabilizing him before the reaction could escalate. When Max finally opened his eyes, his first words were laced with dry humor. "Well, that was fun." Malinar let out a relieved laugh, her empathy receptors detecting no lingering fear or anger, only faint amusement. "You handled it well. Better than some of our crew, actually." Max chuckled, though his voice was still weak. "Good to know I'm setting records here." The implant's activation marked a turning point. For the first time, Max could understand the crew's conversations in real time, and they could understand him without the need for the lexicon. The improvement in communication was immediate and profound. Kabo, however, remained skeptical. During one of the morning briefings, he crossed his arms and glared at Max, who was now permitted to attend via hologram. "So, human," Kabo said, his tone sharp, "now that you can understand us perfectly, what's your next move?" Max met Kabo's gaze steadily, his expression calm. "My next move, Captain, is to keep doing what I've been doing, helping you understand my species and proving that we're not the monsters you think we are." Kabo's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Malinar stepped in. "Kabo, he's been nothing but cooperative. The implant has only made communication easier. Isn't that what we wanted?" Kabo grunted, his claws tapping against the table. "We'll see." As the days passed, Max's presence on the ship became less of a novelty and more of a routine. He continued to assist with the lexicon, refining it further, and even began contributing to the ship's scientific projects. His knowledge of Earth's ecosystems and technology proved invaluable, and the crew slowly began to warm up to him. One evening, as Malinar and Max sat in the observation deck, staring out at the vast expanse of stars, Max broke the silence. "Do you think they'll ever fully trust me?" he asked, his voice quiet. Malinar turned to him, her empathy receptors picking up on the vulnerability in his tone. "Trust takes time, Max, but you're making progress. Even Kabo is starting to come around." Though he'd never admit it, Max smiled faintly. "I guess that's something." Malinar placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's more than something. It's a start." The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Max felt a glimmer of hope. He was no longer just a stranger among stars. He was beginning to build bridges across worlds. As the weeks turned into months, Max's presence on the ISC horizon became more integrated. The crew, once wary of the deathworlder, began to see him not as a threat, but as a valuable member of their team. His contributions to the ship's scientific endeavors were undeniable, and his willingness to adapt and learn earned him respect. Kabo, however, remained the hardest to win over. The Outhodon captain's mistrust of deathworlders was deeply ingrained, and no amount of progress seemed to fully ease his suspicions. But even he couldn't deny the results of Max's work. One day, during a critical mission to repair a damaged satellite in a volatile asteroid field, Max's quick thinking and knowledge of Earth's engineering saved the crew from disaster. As the ship's systems faltered under the strain of the asteroid field's gravitational pull, Max suggested a maneuver that utilized the field's natural forces to stabilize their trajectory. The plan worked flawlessly, and the crew returned to the ship unharmed. After the mission, Kabo approached Max in the engineering bay, his expression unreadable. Max looked up from his work, bracing himself for another terse exchange. "That maneuver you suggested," Kabo said, his voice low. "It was effective." Max nodded, unsure of how to respond. "I'm glad it worked." Kabo hesitated, his claws flexing slightly before he spoke again. "You've proven yourself useful, human. But don't think that means I trust you completely." Max met Kabo's gaze, his expression calm but firm. "I don't expect you to, Captain. Trust has to be earned, and I'm willing to keep earning it." Kabo studied him for a moment before giving a curt nod. "We'll see." As time went on, Max's relationships with the crew deepened. Malinar became his closest confidant, her empathy receptors allowing her to understand him in ways others couldn't. Ava, ever the logical presence, continued to support his efforts, her holographic form a constant source of guidance and reassurance. One evening, as Max and Malinar sat in the observation deck, the stars stretching endlessly before them, Max broke the silence. "Do you think I'll ever be able to return to Earth?" he asked, his voice tinged with longing. Malinar turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know, Max. The journey back would be long and dangerous. But if anyone can find a way, it's you." Max smiled faintly. "I hope so. There's so much I want to share with them. About the stars, about all of you." Malinar placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You've already done so much, Max. You've shown us that humanity is more than just a deathworld species. You've shown us your resilience, your ingenuity, and your compassion. That's a legacy worth sharing." The final test of Max's place aboard the ISC Horizon came during a diplomatic mission to a newly discovered planet. The planet's inhabitants, a highly advanced species known as the Zanari, had extended an invitation to the Interstellar Council to discuss potential alliances. As the crew prepared for the mission, Kabo called Max into his quarters. The Outhadan captain stood by the viewport, his broad frame silhouetted against the stars. "Human," Kabo began, his voice gruff but not unkind. "The Zanari are particular. They value strength but also diplomacy. I need someone who can navigate both." Max raised an eyebrow. "Are you asking me to join the diplomatic team?" Kabo turned to face him, his expression serious. "I'm asking you to represent us. You've proven yourself capable, and your perspective as a deathworlder might be valuable." Max was silent for a moment, processing the weight of Kabo's words. "I'll do my best, Captain." Kabo nodded. "See that you do." The mission to the Zanari homeworld was a success. Max's unique perspective and ability to adapt to new situations impressed the Zanari leaders, and the negotiations resulted in a promising alliance for the Interstellar Council. As the crew celebrated their victory aboard the ISC Horizon, Kabo approached Max, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You did well, human," Kabo said, his tone genuine. "Perhaps there's more to your kind than I thought." Max returned the smile. "Thank you, Captain. That means a lot." Kabo grunted, but there was a hint of warmth in his eyes. "Don't let it go to your head." In the months that followed, Max's place aboard the ship became unquestioned. He was no longer just a stranger among stars. He was a bridge between worlds, a testament to the potential for understanding and cooperation. As the ISC Horizon continued its journey through the cosmos, Max often found himself reflecting on how far he'd come. He had started as an outsider, a lone human in a galaxy that viewed his kind with fear and suspicion. But through perseverance, empathy, and an unyielding desire to connect, he had forged bonds that transcended species and worlds. And as he stood in the observation deck, gazing out at the infinite expanse of stars, Max knew that his journey was far from over. There were still bridges to build, worlds to explore, and stories to tell. But for now, he was exactly where he needed to be. And so, the story of Max Williams, the human among stars, came to a close, or perhaps it was just the beginning. In a galaxy of endless possibilities, he had found his place, not as a stranger, but as a beacon of hope and unity.